Hi, I'm Rena Greenberg. According to Byron Katie, the unawakened mind is like a prison. And the Buddha tells us that all suffering is caused by attachment. And I think our biggest attachment is to the incessant thinking of the mind. Are you attached to the drama that's constantly unfolding in your own head? But Byron Katie also says that the awakened mind is a place of peace, creativity, compassion. I think of our mind like a lake, tranquil, still, and every thought is like a pebble, sending ripples across the water. Is your mind calm and still, or is it wavy and turbulent? Well, I've discovered 3 pitfalls that we have to avoid if we want to create a calm and tranquil mind. And the first pitfall we want to avoid is the tendency to let other people determine how we think, feel, and act. I love the story of 2 men, Bob and Pete, and they were walking down the streets of Brooklyn to the subway. And Bob stopped to get a paper. And he gave the clerk behind the counter a quarter, and he asked for a copy of the New York Times. And the clerk didn't give him the time of day, just threw the paper at him. But Bob stayed a moment and thanked him and told him to have a nice day. And Bob and Pete continued to walk on. Well, the next day, again, Bob and Pete were walking towards the subway in Brooklyn, and they stopped. Same newsstand, same clerk, and Bob gave the man a quarter and asked for a copy of the New York Times. The man grabbed the quarter, threw the paper at Bob, but Bob stayed a moment, thanked him warmly, and told him to have a nice day. And they continued on. Well, the third day, the same scenario occurred, and Pete couldn't stand it. He said, "Bob, this man is so rude. He's not giving you the time of day. Why are you so warm and friendly towards him? Why do you waste your energy?" And Bob looked at Pete and he said, "Pete, why am I going to let that man determine my mood, my attitude?" But how often are you and I, like Pete, letting other people dictate our moods, our feelings, our actions? To avoid that first pitfall, we want to wake up every day and decide the qualities we want to embody. Do we want to hold on to anger and impatience? Or we'd rather choose for ourselves dignity, integrity, kindness? And we have to make that decision to embody these qualities that help us to feel the way we want to feel and return to them throughout the day. The second pitfall we want to avoid is a tendency for the human mind to rush to judgment and decide how other people need to behave. I love the story told by best-selling author Stephen Covey. About a time he was on a train, and into the train walked a dad with 3 kids. And the kids were running wild all over the train, yelling, screaming, and the father was just ignoring them. And Stephen Covey couldn't believe it. He was getting so aggravated. He was thinking to himself, "My God, that man doesn't even care for his children. I would never let my children act like that." Finally, when he couldn't stand it any longer, Stephen Covey turned to the man and he said, "Are you aware of how your children are behaving?" And the man, who had his head in his hands, just looked up as if seeing Stephen Covey the first time and said to him, "I am so sorry. I apologize for my children. We're just coming home from the funeral. They buried their mother this morning." But so often we tend to rush to judgment thinking that we know best. And to help us avoid that tendency, we can stop and ask ourselves a few questions when we find ourselves judging a situation. We can ask ourselves, how do I know things aren't happening exactly as they're supposed to? Do I really have all the information I need? And we can ask ourselves also, what meaning am I giving this situation? Because if we're emotionally charged, it's because we're attaching a meaning to what's happening around us. But the Course in Miracles tells us that nothing means what we think it does. So it can be very helpful to step back and realize maybe we're taking things a little too personally, or maybe we need to broaden our perspective. So to avoid the second pitfall, it's very helpful to realize that things are happening as they should. And the third pitfall we want to avoid is the mind's tendency to want to be negative. It seems that it's the natural default for the human mind to go into negativity. It's like gravity. So we have to be vigilant about pulling our thoughts up to the positive. We really can't afford the luxury of a negative thought. According to the law of attraction, like attracts like. So when we think negative thoughts, we're actually attracting more negative thoughts to us. We're attracting negative people, negative situations to confirm our very beliefs. But the good news is the law of attraction works for us in a positive sense as well. So when we think positive thoughts, we attract positive thoughts to us. We attract positive people, positive situations. So we have to have the courage to turn our thoughts around into the positive. Think of your mind like a calm, clear, tranquil lake. And to help keep that mind calm and tranquil rather than turbulent and wavy, we have to avoid letting other people determine our thoughts and actions, rushing to judgment and turning into the negative, and instead bringing ourselves up into the positive. And when we think of our mind like a lake, yes, we're going to have stones that get thrown into our lake. That's inevitable. But we always have the choice to dive down into the center of the lake, where you can fill yourself with the peace and the calm and the safety that exists there. And then rise up to the surface, radiating those qualities, and go forward to live the fulfilling destiny that you were born to live. Thank you so much for taking the time to share this with me. Thank you.